current definition of postpartum hemorrhage, which is a blood loss of 500 mils or more, was developed in the 1930s based on expert opinion. How does it relate to clinical outcomes or prognostic outcomes? Does the use of this definition improve clinical outcomes? Is it still fit for purpose? I'm Arri Coomarasamy, Professor of Gynecology at the University of Oxford, Nuffield Department of Women's and Reproductive Health. And in this video, I will answer this question based on an article that was published in the Lancet recently. In fact, the Lancet found this work to be so important that they fast-tracked the publication. This study is an individual participant data meta-analysis of various clinical markers such as measured blood loss, blood pressure, systolic and diastolic, pulse and shock index, and how well these clinical markers related to clinical or prognostic outcomes. The prognostic outcomes of interest were many, but we had a composite primary outcome which looked at maternal mortality and severe morbidity from excessive bleeding at childbirth. Severe morbidity included blood transfusion, admission to intensive care unit, and also operations to deal with excessive bleeding at childbirth. This work was a monumental piece of work led by our colleagues at the World Health Organization, with contributions from various teams, including our team at Oxford. The final analysis included 12 studies with over 300,000 patients. It is a definitive study of this kind. What did we find? We found that the current definition, which uses a blood loss threshold of 500 mils, identified 76% of women who would run into trouble from postpartum hemorrhage. In other words, it had a prognostic sensitivity of 76%. Put another way, it missed 24% of women who would suffer adverse outcomes from postpartum hemorrhage. That is 1 in 4. Now, before this IPD meta-analysis was carried out, the World Health Organization had sought the consensus of a group of international experts on what would be the minimum acceptable prognostic sensitivity for a robust definition of postpartum hemorrhage. And the answer was 80%. In other words, the group of experts from throughout the world wanted a PPH definition to capture at least 80% of women who would go on to have adverse outcomes from postpartum hemorrhage. Clearly, the current definition that uses 500 mils does not achieve this goal. However, when we lowered the blood loss threshold down to 300 mils, we achieved the desired prognostic sensitivity of more than 80%. In fact, we got a prognostic sensitivity of 84% if we used 300 mil threshold for defining postpartum hemorrhage. So this is great news, but this came at a cost. The cost was loss in prognostic specificity. So the prognostic specificity, which was about 80% with 500 mil threshold, had come down to about 55% with 300 mil threshold. This would mean treating many women for postpartum hemorrhage unnecessarily. So we had this challenge. How can we achieve the desired prognostic sensitivity but without compromising prognostic specificity? Fortunately, the data showed us the way. When we combined the blood loss of 300 mils or more with an abnormal vital sign, namely a pulse of more than 100, systolic blood pressure of less than 100, a diastolic blood pressure of less than 60, or a shock index more than 1. So when we combined the blood loss of 300 mils or more with any one of these abnormal vital signs, we achieved excellent prognostic sensitivity, but without compromising prognostic specificity. In fact, the prognostic sensitivity was about 87%, with prognostic specificity of 75%. This is very reasonable. So, based on this work and other important work, The World Health Organization, FIGO, and ICM now define postpartum hemorrhage as a blood loss of 300 mils or more, plus an abnormal vital sign, or a blood loss of 500 mils or more on its own right. Importantly, the blood loss has to be measured objectively, for example, using a blood collection drape. Make sure that you use this new definition in your clinical practice. If you wish to know more about this article, if you wish to dive deep into it, there is a scan code coming up which would give you access to the full article, and there should be a link at the bottom of this video.